literally for $1,500, $1,800, $5,000 at the most, with digital cameras, with non-professional actors. They're like little communities that form around a director-writer figure. People fall out of bed into filmmaking, fall back into bed. You know, it's like a community comes together to make a film set mainly in an apartment maybe, or several apartments. They're all about personal relationships. There's no violence. There's no music. I mean, there may be some music within.
They sound like Eric Romer films, actually.
Well, except not at that level of perfect
craft.
Technique. Yeah. Although they look pretty good. I mean, and student work. I mean, here at Drexel, I just saw some from last year. They looked very good.
But you don't review these sorts of films?
Well, I did a piece on mumblecore as a genre, and whether it'll survive, because people want to work with professional actors, and so they move up to bigger budgets eventually, and they want to do multiple locations. So I don't mean there's any virtue in staying there, but people can get into this game literally for nothing.
If they're ingenious about it.
And that was not true. When I was in film school 40 years ago, we had to pay for film. And if you had very generous parents, that was one thing. Otherwise, you wound up making a film about the local sewage system because the city would pay for it. You know, essentially service documentaries. Now all you need is a digital camera. And I talked to a documentary filmmaker the other day who worked in film for years. He said, for me to shoot an hour of film in a documentary would cost about $1,100 just for the film to be shot, to be purchased, shot, and developed. For that, in that hour, I can shoot digitally for $40.
Wow.
So all it takes is talent and, some people who want to act and who will do it for nothing.
Of course, yeah. Of course, they can't necessarily make a living off of it.
Well,
but they can
I knew you were going to raise that question. There is that little question.
And I would imagine that you, being at the center of the reviewing industry, so to speak, are bombarded with requests and promotions and
sometimes,
so forth.
Yes.
And I wonder how you navigate that. Is
well,
that difficult?
that's you put your finger on the problem, which is the inundation of stuff. And as newspaper critics fall away because newspapers feel that they don't need them anymore, or if they're part of chains, they just publish one critic rather than separate ones, and the internet takes over, you're going to need people to sort this out, particularly if people start downloading these very inexpensive movies, because some of them are going to be great and most of them are not. Like any art form, the proportion of good stuff to bad is heavily in favor of bad. So you need critics as part of the system.
And now you're one of very few, essentially.
Yeah, but I think
very visible critics.
There are a lot of people writing about movies on the web, and some of them are good, and some of them are just enthusiasts, and just like big studio stuff, or some of them are enthusiasts of some particular kind of filmmaking. You think you need...
But you need to sift the critics,
You need old-fashioned... You need to sort through the critics.
Levels of sifting.
I wish some of these out-of-work critics, and it's easy enough for me to say this, having a nice job, would get together and make a really good critic site, so that you could go to it, to some, new mumblecore movie or some other kind of, inexpensive movie that's going to be downloaded. You can download it. Maybe it'll be on AOL Friday night at the movies, that kind of thing in a few years. It's very imaginable. You need someone to sort out.
Yeah. I know, we both know that American film is dominant commercially, but I wonder if you think that it also dominates aesthetically right now in terms of cinema.
We only see a fraction of what comes out in other film cultures, because India has this enormous, film culture, and a few of them, Bollywood musicals or something come through a year, and they seem, odd to us, and we don't know what the mainstream is. We see more French movies, I think, than Italian or German.
That's
Those
true.
are fairly rare.
And why do you think that is?
Oh, just because they think Americans just want to look at France and want to hear French spoken and like French actors. But there's a very good movie that's just coming to Philadelphia, White Ribbon, by Michael Haneke, who's an Austrian, and it's set in Germany on the edge
he did Cachet, which I thought was an extraordinary movie.
Yeah, well, this is even more extraordinary.
Really?
It's set on a small town in northern Germany on the edge of World War I, and it's about horrifying things are happening in this small town. It seems like a horror movie almost, but without any supernatural, without any blood. It's below the surface of this extreme control.
Is it in German? Or
it's in German.
Yeah.
It's in black and white. It's physically beautiful.
White Ribbon,
Stunning.
it's called?
White Ribbon, yeah.
Oh, I look forward to it.
So that's definitely one. Yeah.
So is there a national cinema that in particular that you're looking at
Well,
right
the
now?
Romanians, of all people, are making interesting movies, and this has been going on for the last 6 or 7 years. And I haven't been over there, and we're only seeing the best. But that's Iran, about 15 years ago, was really alive, but a lot of the directors left because it wasn't free enough to do what they wanted to do. They were living in Paris, and it's difficult being an exiled filmmaker, being separated from your language, from your culture. So there are periods. There was a period when Brazil was very hot, way back in the early 70s, and of course the new wave in France went on for years. And then they peter out. So
yeah. So you feel? What about the French? Have they, in your opinion, petered out? I see Eric Romer recently died.
Eric Romer died at 89. Yeah, last week. We're not seeing anything that's as exciting formally as the early Godard movies. They're sort of what you have to call bourgeois filmmaking. That is, they're about families, they're about work. I mean, and they're in some ways more serious about those things than our movies. Like Summer Hours, which is around, other movies like that, and an occasional thriller, which then gets remade in Hollywood.
I know.
Yeah, for a lot more money. So it's a middling cinema at the moment, but we may not be seeing the best stuff. That's the thing. I mean, it's very hard to open a movie in the United States, foreign film. It's expensive. You've got to pay for all those press luncheons and bring the stars over to be interviewed. And
you haven't been approached as a middleman in some way to see some of these films and help push them in?
Not before they've picked them up. Once they've picked them up for distribution.
But I'm surprised they don't try and do that before they're picked up.
I think that's called being a consultant. You get paid for it.
Oh, I see.
I don't think I can do that.
Okay, that would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I think that's called being a consultant. And also, there's nothing wrong with their taste.
Yeah.
The problem is making a dent in the audience, and it started in the Reagan period. We sort of drew in.
You mean the American viewing public?
There was it was never enormous, but there was a much bigger audience, steadier audience, campus audience, college towns, big cities, for foreign films in the 60s and 70s than there is now.
It's interesting, with all the outlets, you would think that there would be more of an appetite, but in a sense there's been a narrowing.
They play at festivals. A lot of them, and there are festivals now everywhere, and that's where a lot of people who are interested in what's going on in these foreign cinemas see their stuff. Or you can get the DVDs, somehow or other, either through Netflix or online. Just buy them outright.
Yeah.
But that's the festivals. Even though, as I was sort of skeptical about them a little while ago, they do serve an important function.
So, and I do know people who actually go to festivals. They make it their business. These are not reviewers or not in the industry. They just go to the festivals and watch films there.
Well, they're important because they spread the word and the buzz and, make part of the audience for these movies.
Right. Well, in terms of your actual reviewing, I mean, you're a wonderful stylist. Tell us a little bit about the writing part of it, and whether when you're writing a review, are you looking for something? Are you looking for, I don't know quite how to put it. As a writer myself, I know sometimes things will click and you just know you've got it, or you've captured what it is you want, and sometimes it doesn't, it goes flat. I wonder if you have tricks for that, if you think about that as you write. You have to write a lot, so...
I don't think I go with any preconceptions. I just go to have a good time like everyone else. And I take notes. I write down in the dark.
You take notes as you're watching.
As I'm watching, which is not always the best thing because you miss little pieces of dialogue. I mean, my wife's always astonished by the things I've missed.
Yeah.
So she's like fills in. But I don't go looking for anything in particular. I just let it hit me.
But I meant in the writing part of it.
Then in the writing, you have to recreate what it was you felt when you were watching. And then you try to objectify that in prose, in language. And what I always tell students is, no matter how many movies you see, if you want to write criticism, don't forget, our medium is language. It might be just as relevant to read Shakespeare, or Henry James or Jane Austen as it is to see 500 movies from the 1930s, because we have to express ourselves in words. So the problem of criticism is not just judgment, right? That's one part of it. and it's necessary, but it's not even the most important part. The part of it is evoking the movie, what it feels like, what it looks like, how the characters interact, what the actors are like. It's a sensuous medium.
Yeah.
Shapes, bodies,
and you have
faces,
to translate that into words.
Voices, right.
Yeah. And
the
that's
sound
hard.
of voices.
Yeah.
And to evoke is the hard part, and that's what separates.
Yeah.
Everyone has opinions. What separates the good writers from the ordinary ones is that evocative ability to recreate the experience of actually seeing the movie.
Yeah.
So that's the large process, and the problem is trying to keep your language fresh.
Yeah.
And not fall into cliche and journalese, which is very, very easy and very, very tempting.
Well, I have one more question for you, and that is whether you yourself have ever felt inclined to make a movie.
I don't think so. I fantasize movies in my head, but I don't actually, take the first step towards actually doing anything. I mean, I think criticism can be a very high-level craft in itself, and it has its dangers and satisfactions. So I've never been tempted. But my son is working in television, so he maybe, the next generation will do it.
Okay, yes. Well, he'll do something perhaps.
He'll do something, yes.
Anyway, I want to thank you so much, David Denby,
Thanks
for
a
being
lot.
here today. And thank you for joining us at the Drexel interview.